Lecture 3. Become conscious of your mental construction, discerning what is in the mind. I am the voice of one who cries in the desert, level the way for the Lord.
The prophets. We have to read them in two ways, one from the inner and one from the outer. And in everything you read in the Bible, you will see there is two different aspects. And when you begin to understand truth, then you can read the Bible from that point of view, as well as knowing the historical part as well. Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. We all know how true this is, but few have discerned the fact deeply enough to make it a reality in themselves. By sowing an act, we reap a habit. And it is the difficulty to know what is the cause of our character. Well, we will see that it is often the habit which is produced in the mind in which the person thinks habitually. Habit is the most important thing in molding a character, for once an act becomes a habit, it is passed into the inner realms of the mind and becomes second nature, which is often more powerful than man's personal effort. This must be remembered when one wants to change a mental condition and remove the effects we see on the surface. The more you struggle then, this means when these things become, as it were, more powerful than our personal effort, then we begin to struggle with them, and we do not overcome them through struggle. It is only by understanding that we do overcome them. Because immediately you begin to struggle, you create a resistance. Immediately you create in your mind, or you live in your mind, you create opposites. If you concentrate on health, you concentrate on health because you have ill health. You concentrate on success because you are a failure. And all this is at the opposites in the mind, which causes all the difficulty, therefore you are struggling all the time. It's the same with this in the mind. You overcome something with your personal effort, it can't be done. It will only be done through understanding. And when understanding comes, you discern the cause, and it dissolves away because you become more aware of that inner reality that is true power, that is real, continuously real, and not in any way affected by any reaction from the outside. The more you are aware of reality, the less changeable you are. The less you know of reality, the more changeable you are. So therefore it is necessary to understand so that you become less changeful in your reactions to things. Changing a mental condition is understanding. This changes the mental makeup. The second stage is to get the habit of understanding and acting out this understanding. When the habit has been established, the mind is changed and the truth becomes embedded in the mind. The more you discern these things, you will see how false they are. You will see the hindrances to the expression of your inner reality, so that it says clearly, I am the voice of one who cries in the desert, level the way for the Lord. Therefore we see how clearly that the mind is a desert of man, because it is filled with all these things. I always look upon them as stumps, trees and bushes that we trip over. And I say also, when we discern them and we do not trip over them, we see them for what they are, we get round them and they no longer affect us. We come across many inferiority complexes which are caused in childhood by unwise parents and stupid teachers. While the child may be in an emotional state, these ignorant people create negative impressions in the child's plastic mind. These impressions may remain a lifetime unless the truth becomes known to the individual sufferer. Through such work as we are doing now, or reading works of some efficient writer on these matters which will explain the cause of these symptoms and open the way to the realization of the reality of the self, which banishes all fears and conflicts. But if you do not know what you are fearing, then you are caught up in your fears. But if you discern clearly in your mind all that which is in the mind and see what the mind is made up of, you discern your mental construction. Then by doing so, you find that you are able to dissolve that, not by looking at it and fearing it, not by comparing it, nor thinking it right and wrong, but to look at everything completely impersonally as you would look at a picture upon the screen, so that all these things rise to the surface, and therefore you are discerning the construction of your mind. Yet some people have remained in misery all their lives due entirely to these early impressions because they have not sought their freedom through understanding. This inferiority generally finds expression in a lack of confidence, being able to maintain poise in the presence of others, or receding away from life in general. In this way, one ceases to be creative and becomes merely an imitative machine. When one copies and accepts authority, one becomes drugged. So it is with the majority of people in their early life. They have copied, they have accepted without thinking. And that is our whole educational system today. Children are not taught how to think, they are taught what to think. They grow up continuously in this way and become imitative and less creative. And unless they realize the truth, that this inferiority, which causes them lack of confidence, is a lack of understanding. And also, how many people today are receding away from life. They don't want to face up to things. They would rather not face up to them at all, but escape from them. But there is no escape. There is no escape from anything. Everything must be faced clearly and distinctly and seen in its true perspective, and then you find that you can dissolve it and you naturally grow out of these fears, these imitations, and you become free. Freedom is the whole thing. It's that freedom that you are all seeking. Our general education narrows us. Society, being competitive, wastes our efforts. Newspapers, radio, and cinema are continually telling us what to think and we are caught up in an incessant noise that clouds the mind. If we do not discern then the construction of our mind, we will still be caught up in these things. And the majority of people today are just what we call sponges, absorbing what radio, what propaganda, what newspapers say, and they do not think for themselves. They do not think at all regarding what they have heard. They just accept it. They become sponges. And the more they accept, the less creative they are, and eventually they succumb to this inferiority. The mere suppression of our negative thinking does not solve the problem, but only adds another factor to the disturbance. And to merely conquer is to be conquered again. Awareness through understanding brings creative feeling and frees thought feeling from inferiority. To find a substitute is not the answer. There is no escape save through right thinking, and without self-knowledge there can be no right thinking. There must be the knowledge of the self. What is the construction of the mind? And therefore, by discerning more of the relative, more of the reality makes itself known. You do not create reality. You do not bring reality by your own efforts. Reality comes in without effort. It is itself expressing itself all the time. The only hindrances it has is what I am telling you is the cry of the desert of the mind. I am the voice of one who cries in the desert, level the way for the Lord, clear the path. Through awareness of the self, lost in the greater self, the ways of the self is discovered. And it is this discovering that liberates, that is creative. When the self is liberated from all these things that hinder it, when the self is liberated from all the imaginary impositions that you imposed upon yourselves, when the self is freed from all inferiority, when the self is freed from all these things that are in the mind that prevent the self from expressing the self freely, when all these things are eliminated, the self becomes free. But the self cannot stand by itself. That itself is of no value, for the simple reason it is not creative. The self that feels itself separate and distinct has lost creativeness. Creativeness comes when the self finds itself in the other self, in the greater self that is behind every other self. And this was the teachings of the Master Jesus. How clearly he has portrayed it. He said these words, "He who believes in me believes not in me, but believes in him who sent me. He who beholds me not, but beholds him who sent me." That's the Master's statement. And if you can understand that statement, try and fathom it, you will see his great meaning, the meaning of it I am given to you at this very moment. Showing the whole story. In other words, quite curtly put, I and the Father are one. But unless you see it in this other form, you cannot understand it. I and the Father again has become a platitude. You take it into your mind. You accept it. It becomes only imitative as far as you're concerned, because you have not discerned the true value of the meaning of it. Therefore it is lost in that desert in the mind. You take the idea into your own prison, and it is no longer of any effect to you. First of all, you must break down these windows and bars and walls of the prison you set up yourselves. Once you have done that, then you can take in, you can realize the light. You cannot understand that through belief, which has no belief. You cannot understand that through dogma or creed, which has no creed or dogma. You cannot understand that which has no separation through separation. You cannot discern the light if you're surrounded by a wall that closes out the light. You can only see the light when you go out unto the light. And that is what you can do now without effort. The truth is that we are all equal in the eyes of our Creator. The lack of this understanding is the cause of our weakness. God is no respecter of persons, and we have within each one of us the source of all creative power, and the only barrier to the expression of the creative power is ourselves, with our fears through lack of understanding. Therefore, all inferior attitudes, all superior attitudes are errors and lies and have no existence in truth whatsoever. So when we are facing others, we should know the same life flows through all. With this understanding, we'll realize that it is the life principle in us that is speaking to the life principle in others. The personality is of no value. The personality only becomes a vehicle through which the greatness of that spirit within expresses itself. The more the personality is free from dominance, free from possessiveness, free from all these things that hinder the expression of reality, the more powerful that personality becomes. It becomes, as it were, the vehicle through which the Spirit manifests. And it is this thing that you must see first and foremost to clear the mind. First of all, become conscious of your mental construction, discerning what is in the mind. We must forget the superficial self and look beyond the personality of the person to whom we are speaking. He or she is hiding a life behind the personality that is created by the superficial self. The crust has no power because it is false, and we must discern this with our deeper self. When we merge the self with the greater self, have touched the source of all power, wisdom and love, and there is nothing to fear. You have lost nothing, you have gained more, and you will free yourselves then from these things that possess you, that surround you, that hold you by the throat, that make you miserable, that do all these things to you that prevent the reality itself from manifesting through you. But immediately you discern your mind, then you find yourselves nearer and nearer to this power of love and wisdom that gives expression to itself and you feel the desire to give expression to that which is love, wisdom itself. When this is established through constant awareness, we will have a confidence that nothing can shake. As soon as we have realized our true nature, we will lose all sense of inferiority or superiority, because the one is the same as the other. When you want to overcome an inferiority in your mind, and you do not understand, what you do, you create a superiority. And you think by creating this superiority in your mind, you overcome the inferiority. But I tell you that the more you increase this superiority, the more you increase the inferiority, because the one is built upon the other. This is the mind. That is what we call double, the opposites in the mind. And these opposites will always oppose each other. And the more you struggle to appear superior, the deeper within you will feel inferior. Surely it is quite clear to see this. But the stupid people who teach you today is people who say, do this and do that. They are not teachers at all. I told you a teacher is not a teacher if he tells you to do this and do that. A teacher is only a teacher when he directs you to that power within yourself, when he directs you to discern what is in your mind, so that you can free yourselves from your own burdens. That's a teacher. But a teacher that tells you to do a certain thing is first of all a fool and also a liar, because he doesn't know. Now I say to you clearly, as soon as you begin to see what I am driving at all the time, to eliminate from your minds these opposites you are continually struggling with, you will find freedom. After we have established this awareness, we can create images by means of words. Once you have found this awareness, and this awareness becomes the source of your thinking, and the source of your creativeness, then you can express a word. And the meaning of the word has not the opposite at all, because you know you have created it. There is no struggle now. There's a feeling of freedom. And you know that your word goes forth, and it doesn't return unto you void, but accomplishes that which is sent forth to do. But if you live in your mind in these opposites, your words are only creating the very opposite of what you want. Now, don't you see what I mean? First of all, then, you've got to discern the construction of your mind. Then you have to clear a path for the Lord. Then you have awareness of the Lord being yourself, one with the Lord. Then you know that you are created, and you find this freedom through this simple process that Jesus taught. But very few could understand his teachings, as we will very soon see as we go through these lessons, how few people understood him. Now, after we have established this awareness, we can create images by means of words. We'll begin to understand that words express ideas. Ideas create images. A word can become a center of an idea the center of an image, and the image the center of a growing mental realization or habit. And this becomes an impregnated power in the mind. Therefore, we can use words with understanding to help us out of our difficulties. Our words do not just become affirmations which create their opposites, but accomplish what they are sent forth to do. If you, without understanding, repeat an affirmation, that affirmation brings up the opposite. But if you, through understanding, express a word, that word will bring about what you have sent it forth to do. Now it is understanding that is behind all things. We can now hold the following words in our minds, thinking their meaning: courage, confidence, poise, firmness, equality, fixing the mind on their meanings until they become alive in us. In acting them, we establish the habit of acting that way. We are now creative. We have left behind these things that hinder us. But remember this, as I have told you first and foremost, what is necessary for you to do is to become aware of the construction of your mind by discerning what is in it. Then, by doing so, you will find that your fears, your inferiorities, superiorities, and all these things in the mind that you've been struggling with in the past will leave you, because you will no longer be affected by them. The process is simple. The truth is simple. It is only difficult because we do not understand. If we picture ourselves in the most trying circumstances manifesting these qualities, and if necessary rehearsing our part, then we establish in our minds the truth of what we are in reality. Overcoming all things, all power has been given unto me in heaven and on earth. And when the time comes, we'll find that we have these qualities, and the old worries, fears, inferiorities, and infirmities will have dissolved away, because they only had the power we gave them. To keep the awareness of reality always, to think it, we will grow into it more and more every day. We'll find we'll be able to say no when we mean no, yes when we mean yes. We must forget the personality and become aware of the universal life of which we are and all are one wise expression in us. There is no other way. If you find yourselves in difficulties, you will then discern why. You will look into your mind and you will see the cause of these difficulties. Why struggle then in ignorance? It is not necessary for you to struggle in ignorance. You've only got to discern there, and you will see the cause. Remove the cause, and with it goes the effect. For instance, if you become conscious of your mental construction by thinking upon your thoughts, by discerning them, you can clarify and simplify the details as they appear in your mind, calling to mind the circumstances of another person and putting yourself in other person's place. Notice your reaction to the stimulation and compare his reaction to what you would have done under the same circumstances. Then you will understand yourself better. Now turn your mind away from the material world and let your mind soar into the realms of pure thought and the creative power within. Thought is only pure and constructive when your mind is clear, when you have cleared a path for the Lord, Above all, feel the awareness of reality and the qualities you attribute to Him who created you, and see to what extent is your awareness. This must have been the state of the Master's consciousness when he became Supreme Master after 40 days and 40 nights in solitude. It is only by conscious effort and practice that we can realize and make use of the great possibilities that are ours. By this practice, day by day, we increase our power and understanding. When we read about the Master going into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, without food or drink, there, looking into his mind, discerning everything that is relative, discerning everything that is a hindrance to the expression of the Christ within him. And after he had completely discerned everything that hindered that which is an expression to the true Christ that was ruling in him and in every other soul, he came out into the world. Then he was tempted. Why was he tempted? First of all, he was tempted with food. Why was he tempted with food? Because it was the outer self. The body then desired something to keep it alive, food. So therefore he had the craving for food. And there was no food in view. But there was something within him said, why, here's the stones, you can turn them into bread and eat them. And that is a truth, that the Master could have done that straight off the reel if he wanted to. But he said, get thee behind me, Satan. You shall not tempt the Lord thy God. Here was the outer self craving then, again, after he had found himself the Lord complete, that could do everything. There was the Creator behind all things. There was the Creator of the stone, Creator of the trees, Creator of everything around him and about him and within him. And that creative power was in himself. He discerned everything relative until such time as that creativeness become an awareness of itself. That was the freedom of the Master. I can see it. I remember myself in the Himalayas going for 7 days and 10 days in this discernment, discerning everything that's relative, until such time as I found more and more of reality, becoming stronger and stronger in reality, and I found these things that used to overpower me and hold me back, I give them power because they had no power. I was the creativeness. I created them. I give them power. And so do you. But when that discernment was over, the pangs of hunger was so great that you could eat anything. And I could see the Master's 40 days and 40 nights, how the pangs of hunger must have affected him too. But yet, even these pangs of hunger did not cause him to lose that awareness of the creativeness within himself. Therefore, there was something else that sustained him. I have food of which you know not, he told his disciples. And when they said to him, do you think that someone has given him something to eat? His own disciples did not know and understand this creativeness because they did not discern deep enough. If you then will follow this example of the Master, you will find you will clear a path in your mind. The Lord then shall be the Lord. The Lord said to my Lord, sit on my right hand. In my early life, I remember reading books on philosophy, that my parents did not understand. And when these books were taken from me, I was forbidden to read them because they were considered far beyond my understanding. Yet I could understand them, and I couldn't make my parents believe I could understand them. Yet I knew something deeply within myself, something more glorious than words could express. These books only confirmed what I already knew. They only give me the clue to which I knew within myself. This brings to my mind the truth of the boy Jesus. We are told that he grew up, waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. In Luke 2:41, every year his parents used to travel to Jerusalem to the Passover festival. And when he was 12 years old, they went up as usual to the festival. After spending the full number of days, they came back. But the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. His parents did not know of this. They supposed he was in the caravan and traveled on for a day, searching for him among their kinsfolk and acquaintances. Then, as they failed to find him, they went back to Jerusalem in search of him. 3 days later, they found him in the temple, seated among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions, till all his hearers were amazed at the intelligence of his own answers. When his parents saw him, they were astounded. And his mother said to him, "My son, why have you behaved like this to us? Here have your father and I been looking for you anxiously." "Why did you look for me?" he said. "Did you not know I had to be at my father's house?" The difficulty in the Orthodox religion is this, that they have made Jesus something beyond human nature. They have displayed him as something not born of woman and man, but something entirely different. Now, every child that is born of God. You do not know how you come into the world, and you do not know how I come into the world. Only the Father knoweth how you and I come into the world. And it's by the Father only you come into the world. And as the Father knoweth, he alone knoweth. Then you come into the world to witness unto the power of the truth of God. You come into the world to witness unto the truth of God. Call no man your father who is in earth, for one is your Father who is in heaven. The mention of his age indicated that he had not attended the feast before, and now became responsible for his religious duties. His parents found him sitting on the floor as a scholar, while the doctors or teachers sat on seats in a half circle, hearing and asking questions, which was the usual Jewish method of teaching by question and answer. And perhaps among them was Nicodemus and others. If you go into the temple in Jerusalem, you will see the same thing. You will see young people, old people sitting on the floor, and the teachers sitting in a semicircle around them, and they begin to ask questions and answers. And this is what we see Jesus doing, sitting there among the teachers, mystifying them by his questions, because he had in himself a clearness that very few people had, born for the purpose of bringing into operation, showing men the way of salvation. through life. Take hold of this tree of life. This is the way of salvation. Let go of this tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you eat of the fruit, you will die in your sin. Here is your salvation, the one life that grows in God. That is your salvation. The intelligence of Jesus mystified them. Is it not so that a child often mystifies his parents and teachers by the intelligence of the questions he asks? His parents are amazed to find Jesus so occupied that he had forgotten them. This is the last mention of Joseph in the Gospel, and it is generally accepted that before Jesus commenced his work among the people, Joseph must have passed on to the higher life. Next we hear of Jesus is when he was baptized by John the Baptist. Here is a time of nearly 17 years from the time we read of him in Jerusalem to the time that he was baptized by John. Those 17 years are, as it were, a whole blackout on the life of Jesus. But those who know about him know perfectly well that he did not remain in Palestine. He did not remain in Judea. He traveled throughout the whole of the world because, first of all, he went to Egypt. From Egypt he went to India. From India he went to Tibet. And through the ages he gathered up tremendous amount of information. And by doing so he was taught by the greatest teachers of the world. Teachers that were almost like himself. Like, we will say, Prince Hafed, the great Magi of Persia. Hermes, the great teacher of Egypt. And one of the ancient teachers, which is known as Geshe Rinpoche. Geshe Rinpoche, of course, is a name given to a great teacher which is called the precious jewel. It is known in the ordinary sense of the word in India as Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the lotus flower. So is Geshe Rinpoche the precious jewel which reaches that particular state of a teacher who is given the name of Geshe Rinpoche. Now, these are ancient records of this great teacher that went through the world. And you can see when he goes back to his home, he is then arrayed with a tremendous amount of knowledge. Yet he was not complete until he had completed that 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. To such time he was able to discern everything that was relative, even all that he was taught by even the greatest of all teachers. He found that all that was relative, and he became aware of that creativeness in himself that nothing could withstand. That creativeness that created the stones, created the trees and the flowers and the animals and every human being. Therefore, with this tremendous power of the Lord, he performed miracles. For he said these words, "These things I do, even greater things shall you do, if you will but understand." And I know that to be true too. When I was in the Himalayas, I know how tremendously powerful one can get when there's a way from anything that distracts the mind, while one is discerning what's in the mind. You become a power of levitation. power of healing. Pranayama becomes easy to the individual who is passing through those stages. And you become aware of a creativeness that you had never known before. Even the flowers will bend towards you, even the trees, the rain and the winds and the nature and the animals and the birds and all these things respond. The creativeness that is created them is within yourself. But first of all, you must find that love and wisdom, whereby you feel in harmony with them, not with fear or feel superior or inferior, but a harmony with them as the Creator would have. For the sparrow falls to the ground. Not even a sparrow shall fall to the ground, but your heavenly Father knoweth. And this is what the Master knew, I and the Father are one. He who believes me not, but him who sent me. He who beholds me not, but him who sent me. The next year of Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. This was on the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, while Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea. John the Baptist preached in the uninhabited areas called the wilderness, and multitudes went out to hear him. So he takes his text from Isaiah. I am the voice of one who cries in the desert. In Isaiah 43:5 it states, Hark! There is one calling, clear the way for the eternal through the waste. Level the high road for our God. Cross the desert. Every valley must be filled up. Every mountain and hill lower. Rough places smooth, ridges turned into plains, and the eternal glory shall be revealed before the eyes of all, such as the orders of the eternal. The hills and the valleys, and all these ridges that exist in man's mind, in the soul of man, must be cleared away. Isaiah the prophet, he knew the inner, but the language of the prophets was always veiled. The secrets behind them were veiled, and only those who could read the secrets could understand them. That's why I do not allow any public people to come in here. In fact, I often refuse people who ask me to bring a friend in. You students have been students for some time. You're beginning to understand. Therefore, these veiled words and secrets of the prophets are being illuminated, cleared, so that you shall understand clearly the meaning, because these things have tremendous power, more power than you shall ever know. That's why they were always kept as secrets, except to those who could understand them. John put his own interpretation upon it, which reads, It is written in the book, the saying of the prophet Isaiah, voice of one who cries in the desert, make the way ready for the Lord. Level the path for him. Every valley shall be filled up, every hill and mound laid low. The crooked made straight, the rough road smooth. So shall all flesh see the saving power of God. In Matthew 3:4 we are told, This John had his clothes made of camel's hair, with a leather girdle round his loins, his food of locusts and wild honey, the food of the desert. John was a hermit, such as these we know of in the Himalayas. So John said to the crowd that came out to get baptized by him, "You brood of vipers, who told you to flee from the coming wrath?" Of course, you see, I can understand John the Baptist. He was one of the wild men of the desert. And so they have them right away in the Himalayas. So you have them hermits in these places. But in my own view, although they know something, they're of very little value to humanity unless they can give forth the truth. So Jesus was seen the greatest exponent of all truths, the greatest master of all masters, coming down to the level of the little child and saying, "Yes, unless you become like one of these, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven." So I said, "You brood of vipers, who told you to flee from the coming wrath?" In the ordinary text it says, "O generation of vipers, who hath warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" And when they asked him what they should do, he answered, "He that hath two coats, impart one to him that hath none, and he that has meat, let him do likewise." Luke 3:11. Matthew 3:7, it states, "O generation of vipers," was addressed to the Pharisees and Sadducees, who together represented the Jews' religious world. The Pharisees had been originally the religious party. The Sadducees was more the worldly party. But at that time, Pharisaism had degenerated into formalism. That is to say, at one time, they used to teach more of the truth. But as it generated into formalism, just as we have today, you go into a church and you do all this form business and everything else, and you do not know what you're doing it for. You kiss the stone, and you do this, and you do that. And you bend your knees and you pray. But still you in your mind heart you have separation. There's your praise or hypocrisy. Formalism has taken the place of the teaching of the truth. John called the people offspring of vipers instead of children of Abraham. Publicans were the tax gatherers. They were hated everywhere because of the fraud and oppression that had been practiced by them, and they were the symbol of the Roman conquest. The Jew who collected the Roman taxes was excommunicated and his whole family regarded as disgraced. John says, "I baptize you with water, but after me one who is mightier will come. He will baptize you with the Holy Spirit and fire." Luke 3:16. There is no doubt that John knew Jesus as one mightier than himself, who could do more wondrous things, for they both belonged to the same sect. Also they were related, being cousins, but they might not have met personally as stated in St. John, because Jesus would probably have been taken away to Egypt or some of these places for to have further teachings. And I know how it is, because there are many young fellows in India and throughout the world who have gone to the Himalayas. They've gone to find a teacher, and they've been sent into the Himalayas so they can be taught, become teachers. The religious Jews were all expecting the coming of the Messiah, and several works current at that time were full of prophecies and revelations about his coming, in books not in the Bible, as such as the book of Enoch. Jesus baptized with the Holy Spirit, which is the life-giving power of the truth, and with fire, which means that which cannot be extinguished. Thus we begin to understand some of the wonderful truths which is set out in the Bible when we become aware of that Spirit, that life-giving power in man, and the fire of the Spirit which cannot be extinguished. We read of this fire in the burning bush. which was not consumed. As we progress, we will see how we also can become like him who showed us the way. For he said, he that doeth the will of my Father is my mother, my brother, my sister. Benediction. O heavenly one, who dwelleth in each one of us, we call thee Father in heaven, for we are thy children. In the summer of our life, may it be that we gather the nectar of equality which grows in the garden of human souls. And in our hearts we shall store the honey of forgiveness, so that when winter's blasts come, we shall feed on thy love and mercy. Sweet is the honeycomb filled with thy forgiveness, which we have found in thy loving Son Jesus. Our devotion is filled with gratefulness, and we shall broadcast our joy with a chorus of thy blessings, O heavenly one.